Hi friends, this is Angelica from myloveforpaper.com, and today I'm super excited to be sharing with you my very first coloring video. I'm going to be coloring this sweet little girl from My Favorite Things new stamp set, Care of My Heart. This stamp set is illustrated by Rachel Ann Miller, and Rachel has a new line of stamps that's going to be arriving in the MFT shop this Tuesday, February 2nd. I stamped her with MFT's Milk Chocolate Hybrid ink onto Express It blending card, which is my favorite paper to Copic color on. This paper has a silky smooth surface and Copic colors just blend beautifully on it. Now for coloring, I'm starting off with the skin. I am using Copic colors E11, E04, E00, E000, and E0000. I like to put down E11 first onto the paper just to get the paper wet, and then that helps E04 blend a bit better than just putting E04 down by itself. So I put the E11 down, and then I do a small trace with the E04. I like to be really light with that color, and then I go back with the E11 and flick that color out. I make sure that I grab the E04 color and just do small flicking motions towards the middle of her face. I'm going to go to my next color, which is E00, and this is going to help blend the three colors together. I do like to color fast, so the alcohol ink doesn't have time to dry, even though on this paper the alcohol ink does tend to stay wet longer, which is great. It helps save on ink, and we all know Copic ink is not cheap. So right now I'm just going back and touching up a few highlights before I move on to my next color and making sure that everything's nice and smooth. Now E000 is just going to even blend the colors out even more. You see I'm pushing the colors more into her face. I'm using broader strokes to drag the color. And when I say drag the color, I'm starting at the hairline, touching the darkest with the lighter ink, and I'm pulling that towards where I want to have the highlight. The cheeks, I did R20, and then I blended out the R20 with R00, and now I am using my lightest color, which is E0000, and I'm starting in the middle of her face and pushing back towards the hairline. So I'm pushing the color away from the middle of her face because I want the middle of her face to be the lightest. And the paper might look a little weird right now. The Express It paper does have kind of a weird effect with the really light Copic inks, but it's fine. You just need to let the ink completely dry. So what I'm doing is, even though I want to touch up, add some more ink, I'm just going to let the paper completely dry. I'm moving on to the legs and arms. I'm coloring in the same exact way, starting with my darkest colors and working my way back out to the lightest. I believe I left the E0000 off of the arms and legs because they are such small areas. I like to not color at the very top of the ink line, like on the arm. I didn't go all the way up to the chocolate line. I left a little bit of white from the paper as a natural highlight instead of using a white gel pen. Now I'm moving on to the hair. I immediately wanted this little girl to have pink hair as soon as I saw her, so I picked RV29, RV14, and RV23 for her hair. I'm starting with the darkest color and starting at the roots, flicking out some color, going down to anywhere where the hair bunches up. Just doing some dark flicks out. Now I'm going to RV14, trying to break up a little bit, but I don't want to blend the colors too much. I do want the strokes to be very prominent in her hair. So I'm doing my best not to put down too much ink so they don't blend together. And now I am starting in the middle of the very light highlights. I'm pushing back into the darker strokes. And I am keeping a little bit of white area too, just for some natural highlights. Now, the RV29 was pretty dark, so I did go back with RV14 and just added a couple extra flicks to break up the color. I did get a little bit of the RV in her headband, so I went back with a colorless blender and pushed that color away. Just kind of dabbed it back and forth for the color to just fade into the paper, so you won't be able to see my mistake. I use the colorless blender a lot when I'm coloring. It's by my side always for that reason. Okay, so I have the backpack colored, and now I'm going to be moving on to the headband, which I want it to be white. So to make it look white, I am going to add a little bit of light gray for highlights. Just flicking out from her ears and adding just a little bit of shadow around the medical cross that's on her headband. And this just, it gives the headband just a great dimension to it. I did use the colorless blender to push any gray that got in the middle. Just another trick that I use when I'm using the colorless blender. I mean, I can't say how important it is for the colorless blender to be with me during my coloring process. Just, I use it for my mistakes. I use it to add highlights. I use it to add texture. It has so many great possibilities. I use pretty much the same colors for the flower as I did for the backpack, and then moved on to the purse and boots, which are the same color combination, E37, E35, E33. Of course, starting with E37 first, using small flicking motions out, then going over the flicking motions with E35, and then starting on the other side, pushing the color back with my lightest color. This is just a habit that I've gotten into. I don't even remember who I learned that from. I have watched so many YouTube videos. That's how I learned how to color. It's just practice, 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 and took advantage of all the wonderful card makers, illustrators that are on YouTube sharing their knowledge and just wanting to spread crafty joy. And I just really love coloring. I did not know how much I loved coloring. I picked up my first Copic marker just 3 years ago, and it was a wonderful experience, and I jumped, I mean, feet first. So, okay, moving on to the bunny. I started with E04, added some shadow, blended that out with RV34, and then used RV11 as my lightest. I did that on the belly and on the nose. And for the bunny's body, I used one of my favorite brown combinations, E77, E74, E71, and E70. I love this color. It just reminds me of hot chocolate. It's very unique. I can't use it all the time, but it's perfect for dogs. It's perfect for stuffed animals, woodland critters, etc. It's just a fun color combination to work with, and the colors are all very similar, so they blend beautifully, making the light to, or the dark to light process super easy to blend. Now, when I was coloring, I did color as if the light source was more on the upper right side of the paper looking down. So I did go a little darker. Like you can see right now, I'm adding the E77 where the bunny's face and the little girl's face touch. But I did add darker highlights on both of them on their left sides. And this is yet another habit. I always color with the darker shadows on the left side of my coloring projects. I guess it's my safety zone, and I'm okay with that. It works for me. So if there's something that you find yourself doing a lot and it's working, I mean, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? All right, I'm adding a little RV11, which actually, by the way, is my favorite pink tone. I love muted colors, and it's just a beautiful pink. So I added that in the ear. Now I'm just adding some little dark line around the ear where I would think the shadows would be for the ear, and just finishing up the ears really quick. I did leave a natural white highlight on the back ear. And now I'm going to be moving on to her dress. So I wanted her to have strawberry hair, and I wanted her to have a blueberry dress. So I started with the very light blues for the circle on her dress, and then she's wearing like a pair of shorts, so I gave that very light blue too. And now I'm working with a very bright blue, B18. So I'm being as careful as I can, because if I do smudge this blue, there's no fixing it. So I did take my time with that color going around the purse and the arms and the neck. Now I'm using B16 to blend that 18 out, kind of mute it a little bit. And then also just to break up the line a little bit. So now I'm using the B32 to push the darker colors back, and leaving the B32 to leave a nice blue highlight in the middle of her dress and a bit under her chin. I do like to color my lightest colors first. So you see, I did save the blue for the very last, because I don't want to color the blue and then accidentally touch that blue ink with a very light pen. I will carry that ink onto the arm, say. So I do like to save the very darkest colors for the end. Another thing I like to do, because this is going to be a flat card, I always draw a shadow under the subject, so they're not just floating on the white cardstock. So I'm using light grays to add the shadow, and then I finished up by pushing back the color with the colorless blender just to even out, just to have a nice fade with the grays. Okay, so with my Copic coloring, I love to finish with colored pencils, and especially with images like this little girl where the lines are really thin, they're very whimsical, and it's just too hard to get really good shadows in some of those small areas. So I like to go back with I tend to use indigo blue the most, just to add some more depth to the shadow lines. And I make sure that my pencils are super, super sharp. I have my pencil sharpener right next to me, and I hold my pencil at an angle, like you can see. When I want a more straight line, I hold my pencil towards the bottom. But if I'm just adding a little bit more shading, I hold my pencil towards the top at an angle and color in super soft circles. You can also use Payne's gray, or just a warm gray or whatever to add shadows or to add more detail. I like to use indigo just because it is such a unique color. It just gives a great effect. Like the blue on this brown looks really nice. It just pops. And I'm also using Faber-Castell polychromo pencils. So I'm just finishing up. This is where I start to kind of dilly-dally instead of just being, okay, it's done, I can walk away. Nope, I still have to play, color, add more lines. You see I have an eraser there just in case I go just too far. All right, so when I have flat cards, I do like to finish with just a drop shadow in the back. It's not, I'm using T0 and T02, very light grays, so they're not distracting the character at all. They're just helping her pop off the page a little bit. I see I got a little out of frame there. Sorry about that. All right, well, I'm finishing up with the last of my shadow lines. Then I will be adding a sentiment and getting her on a card base. Thanks so much for stopping by. I hope I've been able to pass on a few coloring tips. If you have any questions, leave a comment below and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. I'll be back soon with another one. Until then, take care.